Okay, so we're back with lesson 6, part 2 of likely 2. I'm thinking that we probably should be done around 1 o'clock today. So we've implemented authentication using .NET Identity. We can register, we can log in, and we can control access both to visual elements in our application in the view by checking our user.identity.isAuthenticated. And we've also set access in our controller using authorize or overriding it with allow anonymous. The one thing we didn't do, I neglected to do, is we hid the product link, but we didn't actually secure the product controller. So let's open up our products controller, and let's also add the authorize decorator to make the products controller private. So in your Solution Explorer, open up your products controller. And on line 15, we've got our class declaration. So let's add authorize here, just like we did in the categories controller. And again, we'll need to accept the same reference. So I'll save that. And now if I log out, pardon me, I'll again make sure that I'm blocked from accessing my product controller. I'm pretty confident that it will work, but we'll just try the link just to make sure. Not exactly great practice to tell your client, well, I think it's secured. Probably good that we check. So I'm going to log out. My link should disappear. And I'll just try browsing there directly. Doesn't really matter, Daniel. We're probably not going to need that view. You can allow anonymous, but now I'm blocked from products. So if you want to allow anonymous on the details view, totally fine. I will just leave mine. So now we want to get into implementing authorization. So the first thing we need is we actually need a couple of roles in the database. So we have an ASP.NET roles table in our database, but it's empty. Yes, Kevin, in the last lesson or two, we will be. You can check the syllabus. So towards the end of the course, we will. So we've got an empty roles table here. It's empty because the roles, like Microsoft can't define the roles for us. The list of roles is obviously depends on the context of the application. So we're building a store. So I want to create 2 roles in the database. I want to create an administrator role, and then I want to create a customer role. And after we do that, we want to create one administrator user. And then we want to modify our register page that Identity built so that anyone else that registers is automatically put in the customer role, because we don't want people to be able to register themselves as administrators. They're automatically going to be registered as customers. So we'll have to do a little bit of manual work for this. So in your database, if you just click on the New Query tab up here in Management Studio, this opens a new query window. And I've put a quick script on Blackboard. In lesson 6, down below the ERD, there's this item here that says SQL for users and roles. Okay. There's 3 insert statements. For right now, I just want you to copy the first 2 only. So this is the first statement creates an administrator role with a role ID of 1. The second one creates a customer role with a role ID of 2. And you'll notice I'm actually inserting the IDs. They're not auto-generated in this table. And again, that's so we can customize the IDs that we want for our own role system, our own role schema. So copy those 2 lines from Blackboard. I'm not going to put them in the chat because you already have access to them on Blackboard. So just paste those in. And execute your query. So this tells me that one row was affected by each statement. And now if I want to select for roles, yeah, I will. Well, the IDs right now, for the roles, you have to specify the IDs. The database doesn't actually assign them. So in this case, you would just start at 10, for example, for the roles. In
Okay,
the table
so
that has, sorry, go ahead.
So you're saying like before you would give anyone access, you could assign the first 10 roles to administrators and then let everybody else have the rest?
Well, keep in mind, these are the roles. These aren't, there's no tie to the users here. These are just the list of roles.
So the ID wouldn't really matter?
No, exactly. The ID doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. I was getting those two confused then.
Yeah. So I'm just going to query the table now. I'll just highlight. I don't want to run my insert again. So I'm just highlighting my select query, executing. So now we can see I've got 2 roles, administrator and customer with IDs 1 and 2. Yes, technically, Jeffrey, it could be. If you wanted it to be, you could. From a data storage perspective, it's not as efficient, though, because in the user roles table, the junction table, it's going to store those foreign keys. So storing, if let's say we've got 10,000 customers, we're going to have 10,000 records in this table. It would be more efficient to store role ID 2 than to store the word customer 10,000 times. Yeah, so could you do it that way? Yes. Is it recommended? Probably not. Okay, so we've got 2 users. So what I want to do now is modify our registration page so that if we create a new account, it will automatically add that user as an administrator. Then we can create one administrator account and then we can change that code. So for every other registration, instead of saving the user to an administrator role, it would save them to a customer role. Okay, so just make sure you've got these 2 roles in your table, and then we can make some modifications in Visual Studio. In order to do authorization, and again, this slide's on Blackboard. So we've made one change to startup. We changed true to false in terms of the require account confirmation. The other thing we need, so by default, our services, it adds identity. By default, it basically just does authentication. It does registration and login and tracking of users. It doesn't track roles by default. So this line of code that's in the slide, we want to add that in to this command, our add default identity. We want to say not only track identity through our database, but also track the roles of our users. So I'm going to go to my startup file, and I'll put this into the paste bin for you as well. So I'm going to go back to startup. So here were the lines. This was the line we changed before. So directly after it, and it's important, this new line of code, it has to go before the command on line 34. The add entity framework store, we need to enable the roles first. So we're going to add roles using identity role. So I'm going to save that code. I'll put it in the paste bin, and I'll also put the link back. I'll paste the link again for you in the chat so you can get here. Whoops. Help if I click copy. So it's the same paste of code link for as before, but what's new is line 2. We didn't have this before, and without it, our application will not store roles along with users. It's only really tracking the users. So make sure you add that. You can either copy the whole thing, or you can just copy and insert the second line of code here. So in my startup, the new line is line 34. And you'll need this in your startup file too. So now I want to go back to the register page to the code. I still have mine open, but if you've closed yours, you can find it again under Areas, Identity, Pages, Account, Register, and we expand register.cshtml. It's this file that I've got highlighted in Solution Explorer. You can see the whole directory tree, right down to register.cshtml.cs. This is the file we want to open. And the code we're going to add, we're going to put on line 81. So line 78 is when the new user account gets saved to the database, gets saved to ASP.NET users. If this is successful, we're going to add this code. We're going to add one user to the administrator role. So in here, I'm going to create a role result. And we're going to use the user manager class that we've used above. Comes with identity. And we're going to call add to role async, where we're going to pass in our new user object. And then as a string, we're going to pass in the role administrator. And this is case sensitive. It's got to match exactly the role name that we have in the database. So I've got to use a capital A. The rest is lowercase. So I'm going to save that change. I'll put it in the paste in the paste bin as well. So this should start on line 81 of Areas, Identity, Pages, register.cshtml.cs. So this means whenever a new user signs up, once we create them in ASP.NET Users, we're also going to add them to the administrator role. So we only want to do this once. Once we have an administrator account, we're going to change this role from administrator to customer. And then we'll create a couple of customer accounts. Okay. First, there's a list in the register page. If I go to the register page, we have the ability, and we'll do this next week, to configure external sign-in providers like Google, Facebook, Microsoft. When I load the register page right now, which is very, very slow, it tells me there are no external services configured. However, if there are, it gets them from the database. It wants to know which providers are set up. Then says, if our register form was completed successfully, so the user followed the validation rules around email and password, we're creating a new user with the email address that they enter in the email box. We're then using the user manager class to create the new user in the database. We pass in our new user object. We pass in the password as a string so that it can be hashed. Once this line of code runs, it will return a Boolean result, a success or a failure. If it succeeds, then a new user account is created here in ASP.NET Users. So we're adding on, and then what happens afterwards is it generates an email if we've enabled that, which we didn't. It will send an email. And then lastly, it signs the user in and redirects them to the home page and shows that they're signed in. Again, if you want to change that, we could change the is persistent to true here if we want to use cookies instead of sessions. That way your logins will automatically persist. So after the new user account gets created, we are now adding our new user to the administrator role with add to role async. So this is a built-in method that comes with identity that we can invoke. That help, Jeffrey? Great. Okay. So I've put this code in the paste of code. If you need it, I'm going to try it. So I want everybody to create an admin account with the same credential. And this is so that you don't have to remember your admin login. We're all going to have the same admin login. So go to your register page and register as admin.gc.ca with the same password we already used, test123$. I'll put this credential in the chat. So admin@gc.ca. It must be formatted as an email address. Password is capital T, test123$. So if we all have the same password, doesn't matter if you forget it next week, we'll tell you what your admin password is. So now I'm going to click register. Let my browser save my credential. Okay, so I'm logged in. So now I'm going to check two tables. I should see admin@gc.ca, should see it in my ASP.NET users table, which I do. Here's my admin. I should also now see this ID that starts with 170 in ASP.NET user roles. And this user should be in role ID 1. So if I check my user roles table, here's my new user ID that starts with 170. And my user has been correctly put into the administrator role. So complete your registration form with these credentials, and then check your ASP.NET users table and your ASP.NET user roles table. You should have an admin@gc.ca user, and that user should be in the user roles table with role ID 1. Lindsay, which part is missing?
It looks like it assigned it to the user's role. Because
is there a record in your user roles table?
Like ASP.NET users?
Check there first. First check ASP.NET users.
Yeah, there's two. There's my users and my admin. Should I have dropped the table first?
No, it's fine. And then check your ASP.NET user roles table. So look in there.
It's 99. Which one was that? Oh no, okay, so it is the admin. Okay, it just didn't have the number that you had. Doesn't have one.
Because that's a globally unique ID.
Okay. Okay, great. No, it totally worked then.
Okay. If your ASP.NET user roles is empty, but your account is in ASP.NET users, is that right? So it created the user, but not the role. Okay, there are a few possibilities here. Do you have the roles in ASP.NET roles, first of all? If you query this table, does yours look like mine? Okay. Yes, so there's two possibilities, and Mike suggested one of them. So either you hadn't saved this change, this addition, to register.cshtml.cs, or possibly you've misspelled the name of the role. So it's this code that's either missing or not running. Because this code wasn't here before, we had to put it in so that that new account would get added as an administrator. So make sure you've added that in the same place I have it in my file, and make sure your file's been saved. Okay. And in your startup file, do you have line 34? Because it won't track roles without this code that's highlighted in blue on my screen. Okay. So I'll leave that up for a second. So now that I've got one administrator account, I don't want to keep that code in my register page. I don't want any more administrative accounts. So I'm going to change that code now and save all future registrations to the customer role instead. So I only have one administrator. Everyone else is going to be a customer. So I'm going to go back to my register.cs html.cs, and I'm going to change the role as a string. I'm going to change it from administrator to customer. So make that change, and now I'm going to create two different customer accounts. I'm going to use the same password for everything to keep it simple. So change line 82, where I've highlighted it, take out the administrator role, replace it with the customer role. Save your change. And now I'm going to create two customer accounts. Actually, maybe I'll do this in Chrome. So I'm going to create two accounts, customer 1 and customer 2. No, you have to change the source code when it comes, well, if you want the roles, you'll have to do it this way, because the roles aren't baked into .NET. You have to define the roles. Well, I mean, yes, you could put a drop-down list on the register page. However, that would still be allowing users to put themselves in the administrator role. So technically it would work, but it doesn't make any sense from a security point of view. So I'm going to now create two customer accounts. Customer 1, and I'll use the same password, $123 TEST, $123 . So now I'm logged in as a customer. I want to check my database and make sure customer1 at gc.ca is in the customer role. So I don't mean to suggest this is the only way to do it, and I'm sorry if I gave that impression. I've found this is actually the most efficient way to do it. The other way you could do it is, I mean, you could make it so the public register page doesn't use any roles at all. You're just authenticating users, and you could have a page inside your admin panel. You'd have to make your own separate registration page to create other admin accounts, but that would have to be a private page. It couldn't be available for self-registration. So you could do that, but that's still going to require customization, because identity gives us this public registration page. There is no other page, like there is no private one for creating users in different roles. So you're going to have to customize and create that one anyway. This seemed like actually a more efficient way of doing it to me. Definitely not the only way, don't get me wrong. So now I'll check my users table again. Now I've got customer 1. Their ID starts with 6EF. If I check my user roles table, I can see that this user, 6EF, is now in role ID 2, which is what I want. I'm going to create one more customer account. I don't really need it for today, but I just want to ensure I'm going to want multiple customer accounts later on. So I'm going to log out, and I'll register as customer 2 with the same password. So now I've got a customer 2 account. Again, I'll just check my database. So now I've got 4 users, our original user account that's not in any role, customer 1 and customer 2, and 1 administrator. If I look in my user roles, my new customer is also in the correct role. So the database and the user accounts are now set up the way we want them to be. And our register page will automatically save all new users to the role of customer. And this is how I want it. I only need one admin account for the site. So we've set up the roles and configured our startup to manage them, but we're still only doing authentication checks on our resources. So, pardon me, as a customer, I still can see the links for categories and products, and I can still go in and change the data any way I want to. Because in our controllers and in our layout file, we're only checking for authentication. We're only checking, is the user logged in or anonymous? We're not actually checking, is the user an administrator? So we want to change that. Okay. So first we're going to change the if statement in our layout file. And then we're going to change the authorize decorators in our controllers. So in the layout file, on line 27, we want to change this. Instead of just checking, doing a basic authentication check, we actually want to check something else. The property the method we need is actually here in the context menu. Can you take a guess which option I should choose here? If user, you got it, Lindsay. If user dot is in role, and then I just provide a string. It is case sensitive. It has to match exactly the name of the role in the database. So if I don't spell it exactly the same way and case sensitive, it's not going to work. So now if I save my layout file, I'll put this in the paste bin. So we're changing the if statement in our layout file. We're no longer checking if the user's logged in. We're checking if they are an administrator. So in Firefox, I'm logged in with my admin account. So my links should be here. Try to make the code visible. I did update it on the paste of code site as well. So as an administrator, I can still see my categories and my products. But now as a customer, those links are hidden from me because those are going to be for administrators only. So we have one more thing we still need to do. We're almost done in terms of implementing the authorization. What else needs to be done? Everything we've done is correct, working the way we want, but what's missing? What can I still do as a customer that I shouldn't be able to do? Right. I can still add, edit, and delete. If I go to products /delete/to, right? I'm not blocked from the method in the controller as long as I'm logged in. Yeah, I could edit the price. I could delete the product entirely. So yeah, the links are hidden, but the controller is still just doing an authentication check. So as long as I'm logged in, I still have access to the methods in the controller, right? I can edit, I can delete, I can create. So how do we fix this? what file would we have to go to? Yeah, we want to change the controller. Right. So we want to change the controllers, Lindsay said. So AJ, it's a little different. Yeah, we're changing, is in role, that we use in the views. In the controller, so I'll go to my categories controller. In our authorize, we're going to add some additional information to the authorize commands. So in my categories controller, I can add roles equals administrator. And it's roles plural because this might be a comma separated list. I might have like a super admin, for example, or owner. So I could put in additional roles. We don't have additional roles. We just have basically administrator. So if I wanted multiple roles, I could just separate them with commas. So by adding a role, it's no longer doing, as Jeffrey mentioned earlier, it was just doing authentication, even though it had the word authorize. It wasn't really doing authorization. It was doing an authentication check. Now we're doing an authorization check. We'll leave the details as public. That's okay. And I'm going to copy that line to my products controller as well. Okay. So in the products controller, I'm going to replace the authorize command with authorize roles equals administrator. And again, it's case sensitive. It's got to match exactly the role name in our ASP.NET roles table in the database. I'll paste this in here as well. So we're going to put it for both of our classes. So now, as a customer, if I try something in my products controller again, I should get kicked out. I don't actually get kicked out in this case because I am logged in, but I'm told I don't have access to the resource. So it's doing an authorization check. It knows who I am. It knows what role I'm in. And the role I'm in as customer 2, I have not been granted access. If I try one of the other URLs, like if I try categories, I'm just going to keep getting the same message. Categories/create. So we now have a true sort of admin section of the website that only that administrator account, that admin@gc.ca, that's the only user that can get in. They're the only user that can see the links, and they're the only user that can access those resources. So pretty much our whole site right now is private. The only thing a non-administrator can do is they really just see our homepage. So I think, Mike, you mentioned this earlier. Like, it's not much of a shopping experience. But typically, with most applications, this is where we start. We usually build the back end, and we use the scaffolding tools with .NET so that the site owners can start populating the content of the database. And that's typically in a private area that the rest of the users don't have access to. So we've set that up now. As the site owner, we can manage the catalog in the store, right? We can create our categories, and we can populate our store with products that are tied to categories, that are priced, and also include Jillian, what do you mean? Can you clarify? Oh. Okay, some good questions. I'll just take a second to address them. I think the back end is easier because the back end, we typically care what it looks like less. So the scaffolding gets us closer to a completed product in the back end. Obviously, we had to make changes, but it didn't take us very long to customize these pages in the back end of the scaffolding. It was pretty quick. Usually the front end, at least the user interface, is more involved. So let's quickly build. We're not going to build the whole front end today. What we're going to do over our next few classes next week, we want to add third-party authentication in here. And that shouldn't take us too long. And as I said, it won't be a heavy lesson. I know you guys have got a bunch of exams in your other classes next week. And then after reading week, we want to build our shopping cart. Very quickly, I just want to build the front page of the store. It's not going to take us very long to do. So let's build the front page of the store. We can do this in the next 5-10 minutes, and then we're done for today. So I'm going to create a new controller, and this area of the site is public. So I'm going to make a new controller. I'm going to add a controller, and I'm not going to use scaffolding for this because we're going to have to customize all the methods in the controller. So I'm going to just pick an empty controller. So add an empty controller. And I'll call it shop controller. So the URL will be localhost/shop, which is a good, descriptive URL for our customers. They know what's happening. So it's just an empty controller class called shop controller. When we create this, Visual Studio will automatically create an index method in here. So what we want to have happen on our main shop page is we want to show the user a list of categories. We just want to show it to them in a more attractive format than this. We could scaffold this view. This is not really a great shopping experience. So we're still going to query the database and get a list of categories. We're just going to show it in a nicer way. And we're not going to have any of these links on there. So scaffold an empty controller called shop controller. And now let's add our database connection, and we'll add a query so that our index view fetches the list of categories and passes them to the view. We didn't have to write this code before because in our categories controller, it was scaffolded. So we're going to have to write the code ourselves. It's not too big. So we're going to declare an instance of our database connection. So we're going to create a constructor. This is the same code that Visual Studio added to our scaffolded controllers before. So if you look at this code, and I'll put it in the paste site, inside our categories controller, we declared our database connection, and in our constructor, we instantiated it. So I basically just copied that code. Instantiate an instance of our DB connection when this class is instantiated. I'll add this code. Yep, you may have to import a library. you may need .NET duds.data because that's where the application DB context lives. It's in here. So yeah, whenever it suggests a reference, accept that reference. So the code's there. So we're basically just doing manually what the scaffolding did in our other controllers. Declare an instance of our database connection, create a constructor in our class that instantiates an instance of our connection. So now we're going to write a query. So our application DB context, remember, it has a DB set of categories. We added this a couple of weeks ago. So we can use this DB set object to query the database. And we're going to order our list by our category name and convert the result to a list. And don't forget this, in my Monday class, a whole bunch of people forgot this step. We've got to modify the return view statement. Once we run the query, we want to hand the query results off to the view so we can display it. We don't want an empty view. We want our users to see the list of categories when they start shopping so they can click on one. Okay. I will update. So there's all the code we should need. I'll update it here for you. So there's the back end. I know it's 1 o'clock. Bear with me for just a few more minutes. The only things we need to do now, we need to create the index view that will display our category data, and we're going to add a shop link to the nav bar, be a public link that anybody can see, even anonymous users, and that's what they'll click on if they want to start shopping. Does anybody have any questions about our query here and our setup with our database? Yeah, I know it does. 3 hours is a long time, and I've also been at it for 50 minutes. I don't like to try to teach more than 50 minutes at a time or keep you guys too long. I don't want to overload you. So I try to keep the classes to 2 hours if I can. So let's build the view shop index. So I'll go to Solution Explorer and open up my views. Now I don't have a folder called shop, so I need to create one. So I'm going to click on views, and I'm going to right click and choose add new folder, which I will call shop, matches the name of our controller. And now I want to create a view in here called index. So I'll right click my shop folder, add a view. I'm going to pick Razor View with a strongly typed model because our view is going to display a list of categories. So pick Razor View, click Add. My view name is going to be Index. Our template is a list. And our model is going to be category. Jeffrey, I think so. That's probably a shortcut. You can do it that way as well. I found sometimes I get an error when I try that, but if it works for you, yes. You can just right-click the method name and choose Create View, and it should create the folder and the view automatically. It's going to use our layout page, so if nothing's selected here, browse to the layout. So you can see all the options. We're creating a view called Index, using the list template. So this is going to build a table like in our categories index. We'll change the format, but this will add at least some starter code for us. We pick our application DB context and click Add. So I'll leave this up for a minute so you can see all the options.
When you go to add new item Razor View, the only option is to just add the view, and then it just adds a blank file.
That's fine. I'm gonna give you the code we needed for the file anyway. So if you want, if it adds that as a blank, that's okay. So I'm gonna add my view. We're gonna put a link to it in our nav bar, and we'll try it out. And then I'm gonna give you some reformatted code so that it's displayed using Bootstrap Cards rather than in a HTML table. So our model is an IEnumerable of type category. And it's going to look exactly like our categories index, really. I've got a bunch of red lines. I'm not sure why. I won't worry about it. So to try it, if I go to localhost/shop, the page is going to look almost identical to my category index. So they're basically the same. So I want to reformat this page. Also, I want to log out. My shop page should be public. So we'll reformat it quickly, and then we're going to change this home link to say shop and load our shop page. We don't need, both of these go to the home page. We don't really need a link that says home. If I just click .NET Duds, it goes home. Well, we'll be working on both. I am going to give you the code for just this page. And after reading week, yes, we're going to build the whole shopping cart, including checkout, payment, order history, all the rest of it. So we're basically done in the admin end of the site. And yeah, we're going to be focused now on working on the front end for the shopping experience. Yes, I would say our admin portal for categories and products is basically done. The only other thing we'd want in the admin site is the ability to look up orders and see order history. So I'm just going to reformat this. So on my page, yeah, I'm going to actually delete everything from line 10 down. So Kevin, you said your page is blank. I'm going to give you all the code. I'm going to change the titles. I'll put the whole code up on the paste site. So I'll change the title to say Shop Our Store. And I'll change my heading to say Shop Our Store. And I'm going to use Bootstrap Cards instead. And I've sourced the CSS for how to do this. So we're going to use our loop and display each category in a card view. I'm just going to check it out, and then I'll upload the code to the paste bin. And then we'll just change our nav link and we're done. So now my shop, rather than looking like the admin page, our shop page is going to have a different look to it. So now we get boxes, rows of 3 with links that don't currently go anywhere. So same kind of functionality as our categories index, but without the links to add, edit, and delete. So here's the full page. Oops. I'll go and edit. So there's the full card view that will break our categories into rows of 3. Center them horizontally. So you can just replace all the code in your shop index with the code I've got here.
I think every time
we'll fix up the link later. We will
No,
want
I mean,
the link so the users can click on a category.
No, I mean like every time you change the paste of code, the URL to that code changes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that. Thank you.
No, it's okay.
Thanks for letting me know. I'm new here. So then I'm just going to change this link in my layout file and call it a day. So I want to change the link so it says shop, and it calls the index method of the shop controller. In my layout file, last change of the day, I have a link on line 25. The link says home and calls the home controller. I want it to call the shop controller, and the link should say shop. So I'm just going to modify that link in my nav bar. So I can click the word .NET duds if I want to go home. And now I've got a shop link that takes me to our shop index. So this will be the start of our front end, the start of the shopping cart. So we're going to let a user click on a category, browse the list of products that will also maybe present in card view. We'll add an add to cart button on there. We'll build a cart page, checkout, payment, etc. And then order confirmation and order history. So we'll build all of those things in the 2 lessons after reading week. So you can see in my code editor, line 25, it's the last line of code highlighted in gray. You can see the change. I've changed that link to the home controller, the home index, to go to the shop controller index instead, and it now says shop. So I'm going to push my changes to GitHub. I'm going to stop the recording. Yes, it will, Kevin. So next week, we want to enable authentication through some third-party services. We're definitely going to do Google. We'll start with Google authentication. We'll see how we do for time if we integrate Facebook and or Microsoft sign-in as well. Okay. If you are one of the 40% of the class who's not handed in assignment 1, it's overdue. And I need it. Please hand it in today to get the most number of marks possible. The longer you leave it, the lower your mark is going to be. Okay, so that's all for today. Thanks for your time and attention and participation today. I hope you have a great week. Good luck on whatever exams you have before I see you next. And I will see you guys next Wednesday. Have a great week.